Coinzel was a regular warrior elf who got sent on a mission and was left for dead by his traitorous comrades. However, he managed to survive their betrayal and spent years becoming overpowered before returning to clap them all. This story starts on the outskirts symbolism by making his knights spill the blood of their recent captives. Minutes pass and Pippi gets caught by a knight right as Rechiva begins heading out. Not ready to conduct an entire ceremony again, he tells them to finish her off discreetly. Just then, Quincel shows up and pulls her away from the guard, claiming to be a worried older brother, but Ratchib refuses to believe him and sentences them both to a proper execution. Coinzel immediately reaches for his sword, but they both suddenly get snatched up by a man named Wade, who then apologizes to Razov on their behalf and slips him a few gold coins for his troubles. After he agrees to let them live, they find a spot to talk, and Coinzel blames PP for ruining his stowaway plans by getting caught. Wade then claims to not give tits about them and says he only helped because their capture could mess up a major smuggling plan he had spent money on. He then wishes them luck and turns to leave, but they stop him to ask about his plans. Before they can get into detail about why they have to get across, Coinzel hears a group of knights approaching and tosses Pippi into the water. In an instant, they get surrounded and the knights demand more gold as Rasha was too greedy to share. On second thought, they decide to take it from their mangled corpses, but Coinzel swiftly cuts them all down in a matter of seconds. After he disposes of them, Wyatt offers to help him get across the border in exchange for borrowing his strength, and Pippi, thankfully, survives the water so they start heading out. Moments later, they get on a boat to travel through the Empire's abandoned ruins before getting to a medieval Hooters pub, where the plotful waitresses immediately attend to Pippi. Wade then goes to have a chat with a kicked-up baddie named Altia, who turns out to be his smuggler. She gets upset by his request for a discount, so he explains what happened earlier and Coinzel's face, thankfully sways her mood. After their talk, Wade takes Coinzel in to speak with her, and he immediately tells her that he doesn't need her help getting across to see the Empire's 7 heroes. She then tells him that the ship she plans to use will be his last shot at seeing them again for a while, as they currently have a mission close to the border. At that moment, Razov locates the pub with a small battalion of knights and holds the customers hostage to figure out who is in charge of the smuggling. Altia then reveals herself and claims to be a virtuous businesswoman before asking for proof of his allegations. Razov immediately brings out an ugly dwarf who then snitches on her for a quick buck. After a night's sense into the afterlife, the rest try to seize everyone else while Ratchib catches Pippi and promises to take his time chopping her to bits. As the knights start to overpower them, Coinzel drops in with a table that halves their numbers. Ratchib then reminds him of the danger of going against subjects of the 7 heroes, but that only triggers him, so he takes them all out while Ratchib quickly escapes. When he eventually gets a safe distance, 2 knights find him panting like a hunted weasel, so he declares martial law to save face. When the sirens begin to go off, Altia tells him that getting on the ship will be next to impossible, but Coinzel claims it won't be a problem and stares at the moon with a look that reminds her of someone similar from the past. She then takes them through a secret passageway and cuts down a bunch of sewer goblins before they run into a colossal monster that brings back her PTSD. Coinzel immediately attacks and gives them hope, but the creature grabs him and punches a hole through the roof with his head. Just then, Wade sees the ship, but Altia starts to bawl her eyes out in horror and tells him to forget about making it out alive. When the creature tries to attack, he manages to push it back and ties its legs up, causing it to trip, but it easily gets back up. He then grabs Pippi to escape and uses a second attack to crack its skull, but it grabs onto the rope and slams him into a wall while Altia runs to catch Pippi. With Wade struggling for breath, the monster decides to snack on the girls, but then Coinzel gets charged up by the moon and drops on its head to offer his thanks for opening up the roof. It immediately tries to squash him, but he dodges and lands a deadly slice that causes its brain matter to spill out. After it drops, Coinzel tells Wade to get his up before suddenly sensing a powerful sword and telling them to back up right before the monster's body gets turned to ash. They then spot Rahab standing with Rangzats, one of the 7 powerful heroes on Coinzel's hit list. Coinzel steps forward to get a closer look, but then he and PP hear a voice coming from Rangzat's sword. Rashab then tells them that Rangzats was once in no good smuggler as well and offers to make them prisoners if they surrender, but Altia tells him to shove the offer up his balding cakes. This provokes him to give Rangzats the order, so he charges up his sword with the fairy trapped inside it and lets off a powerful blast. Coinzel manages to block and struggles to catch his breath before telling Rangzats to stop using the sword, with tears running down his face. Seeing this, Rangzats mocks him for being scared, but Pippi tells him that he can hear the fairy screaming in pain. Rangzats keeps yapping on about being superior, but then Rangzats puts the sword away and demands another payment if he wants the job completed. Knowing Coinzel will likely slice off his baron's scalp, he reluctantly agrees to double the fee, so Rangzats pulls it out again to charge up for a second blast. This time, Coinzel gets overpowered and blasted through a hole while Wyatt and the girls get crushed by the falling debris. After remembering that Altia is actually an old acquaintance, Rangzats walks off, and Wyatt manages to survive with the girls, but he immediately works on a plan to get to the ship and tells them not to worry about Coinzel. Moments later, he wakes up on a bridge and realizes that he is in the deepest part of the monastery before Rashtab shows up and gives him props for surviving the blast. He then summons a unit of his most powerful knights and swears to make sure Coinzel suffers the most gruesome death known to man. While he keeps running his mouth, Coinzel thinks back to when he was a Sherrit and had to leave a trusted comrade named Ergnak, who was setting up a dangerous magic circle in the same temple. When Razab finally gives the order, his knights attack, but Coinzel easily dodges, and they quickly realize why Razab had gone to such lengths. They then try a second attack, but Coinzel evades again and suggests going back to training camp before chasing after Areshev. After the bald lug mouth trips over a step, he tries to call a timeout so the knights can catch up, but Coinzel stabs through the ground and activates a magic trap that destroys them all in an instant. While crying and crapping his holy garment, Rishav demands to know how he used such magic that even he didn't know about, so Coinzel tells him that he once visited the monastery. Back then, he was with Ergnak, who explained how the magic traps worked and made him memorize their locations. Thanks to that, Coinzel remembers what lies ahead and enters the sacred chamber, shocking the plus-sized priest, who then asks how he gained clearance. Coinzel ignores him and walks toward Ergnak's still frozen body, so the priest tells him the famed story of how Ergnak, who they believe to be the attendant of the 7 heroes, completed the magic circle to create the 1,000 stone spears guarding the border city. Coinzel immediately tells him to shut his blubber-filled mouth, so he turns to Rashab to understand how a seemingly weak elf made it into the monastery's most sacred chamber. As Coinzel gets even closer to speak with Ergnach, the priest thinks he is just a misinformed brat and decides to tell him how it all went down 23 years ago. According to their texts, the 7 heroes were sent on a mission to the Forest of Death with 7 other comrades, but along the way, 3 died and 4 others became traitors, so the 7 heroes clapped them before sacrificing their lives with Ergnach to erect the 1,000 stone spears. In reality, Ergnach and Coinzel, who was known as a chariot at the time, were the only 2 who left to erect the stone spears. The priest goes on to say that he was a humble merchant at the time and witnessed the whole event, so he built the monastery to protect the sacrifice of the 7 heroes. One of them, named Shtemelek, who later became a landgrave, then decided to entrust him with overseeing the border. Hearing this, Coinzel cracks up and reminds Ergnach that Shtemelek was once nothing but a smelly and pathetic thug who got lucky enough to be sent on a quest by the emperor. He also had the exact same smile when he and the other heroes betrayed them so they could return as heroes and take credit for a victory that had nothing to do with them. After thanking Ergnach for his sacrifice, Coinzel pulls out his sword, and the priest realizes that he wants to destroy the magic circle, so he tells Rachep to stop him, but the bald weakling refuses. He then shoots out wooden spears, but Coinzel blocks them and cuts open the magic circle. At the time, Wade and the girls have just been surrounded, but then they hear a rumble right before the monastery starts to crumble. While Rachep holds the priest in place to protect himself, the 1,000 stone spears fall apart, so all the refugees rush out to the bridge to cross over. After making it back outside, Coinzel takes a moment to reminisce on Ergnach's final moments before sacrificing himself. With tears in his eyes again, he swears to get revenge on the 7 heroes for betraying them. By then, Rangzats finds Rachep trapped under a boulder and sees a bunch of refugees trying to smoke him, so he lets the bald pig get what he deserves. The rest of his knights try to escape on a ship, but Wyatt stops them and uses it to escape with the girls so they can catch up to the ship. Pippi then expresses her concern for Coinzel's safety right before they spot him on a flying dragon. Meanwhile, on the other side of the border city, the traitorous heroes watch as the stone spears crumble and all the civilians begin chanting their praises for protection, but Sturmelech can already tell that this isn't an ordinary threat. If you liked the video and want to see the next part, don't forget to like, subscribe and comment Overpowered Elf down below.